Well, thanks everyone for joining us. It is the fourth Saturday of the month, so that means it's time to be talking about a Learn Pro Poker video that we shared at Rec Poker earlier this month. So just like every month, Ryan LaPlante and the geniuses over at Learn Pro Poker send us a 1-hour premium training video for Rec Poker premium members to watch for free. That video drops on the first day of every month. And then on the fourth Saturday of the month, we do a study group at noon Central, 9, 10 Pacific, 1 Eastern, and we talk about the subject matter of that video. Premium Rec Poker members are welcome to join me every Saturday. We have a study group on the focus, on a monthly seminar. I do my own poker tracker group coaching session, and we have the LPP one. And you can find out all about that by going to rec.poker. And I hope you do. I'm joined today by Keith and Eric. We've got a great video from Ryan LaPlante that has all to do with open raising from a medium stack. In this case, it's between 40 and 60 big blinds, and responding to 3-bets from various different positions. So Andrew Feist goes and puts these videos together, kind of focusing on one thing. I really like the way he got at this kind of concept of responding to 3-bets, because that's a real tension in poker. I think responding to 3-bets is a very villain dependent kind of a thing. And we are able to get some general rules out of the videos that Ryan puts together, but it's a good thing to be thinking about. Keith and Eric, when you're in spots like this, when you've opened and someone is 3-betting you, what are the factors that you're thinking about? And are there certain hands that you feel like you always know what you want to do with? And are there some that it depends on the situation?
It's very situation dependent. It depends on your opponent. Like uh, in the live games here in the Midwest, if when they're 3-betting, your jacks and queens aren't looking so great. But online, especially on ACR, where 3-betting is becoming quite popular, uh, you can defend with a lot wider of a range. So it's villain dependent, and it's obviously it's hand dependent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're going to be out of position, it's going to be different too. So, and the size of the 3-bet, because we'll see 3-bets that only go for like a min click type of thing, and you're going to be defending against that way more often than say if they 3-bet for 5x. So there's all those factors come into play. It's pretty complicated, and it's important to get to know this topic because it's becoming more of an issue, especially on ACR.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it's something that as poker evolves, it's sort of gotten more aggressive, and I think the way that more experienced players take advantage of less experienced players is through aggression pre-flop like this. 3-bets are really valuable. They're kind of a cliche for a reason. They work. They have a lot of fold equity, and when your opponent doesn't fold, you're continuing with a big range advantage. So I think you nailed it, Keith. The size of the 3-bet, the size of the stack, whether you're going to be in position or out of position, and of course the actual range of your opponent. I think those are all really, really important things to consider before you even look down at your hand and see what your cards are. So one of the things I like about how Ryan breaks down the videos at LPP is the positions are very specific. So he starts out looking at an early position only, and different raises out of there. When we're talking about sort of like a 40 big blind stack, it looks like a lot of the opens are going to be 2.5 big blinds or so. 2 to 2.25 seems to be his preference for that. And I think that's a pretty savvy line to draw there. And we talk at Rec Poker all the time about how when you get north of 50 big blinds, you want to be opening that up to 2.5. Once you get up to 100, it should be around 3, even more. And when you get down into the 20s, it should be more like 2.1, min raising below that, stuff like that. And that should also affect your 3-bet sizing, of course. And we talk a lot about how, if someone's opening a min raise, you have the option of 3-betting them to really any, I mean, it's no limit hold'em. You get to pick the size. And if you're giving them too good a price, you're not really putting them to a decision in the same way. So sizing, I think, is one thing that everybody should be thinking about in 3-bet spots. And it's more about just not letting your opponent choose the size of the pot. You should make them pay a price. You should be the one choosing the size of the pot. You're going to be the one running the show when you come in here with a 3-bet most of the time. So when we're in this spot where we've got 40 or 50 big blinds or something like that, we've made an open. It's probably to 2 1/4, and we're getting faced with a 3-bet to 7 or 8 big blinds where we're going to be out of position, or probably a bigger 3-bet if it's from the blinds and we're going to be in position. So we always have 3 choices. We can fold, we can call, or we can 4-bet. And those are really the only options that are available to us. If we were very deep stacked, we could talk about different sizes that you might use for your 4-bet. When you're in the 40 big blind range, all your 4-bets are going to be shoves. So there is no sizing to be determined. And that does kind of help us when we construct these ranges a little bit, because we only have to come up with one sizing. And we're going to use the all-in sizing for that. So let me just go to my notes here. So this video is in 3 parts, and it starts going through some theory on different ranges, different positions, and then it talks about the range that and this is all GTO based. So right off the bat, Ryan's using solvers to put this stuff together, and the assumptions that they're using are going to be about 2 computers playing perfectly against each other. And he says right at the beginning, like, you should always be playing tighter than GTO. What does he say here? Play 20 to 30% tighter than GTO post flop, because people aren't getting to those circumstances with the same wide ranges with a bunch of garbage in them. So you're going to be making bad assumptions about your opponents if you're playing, solver GTO post flop when your opponents didn't get there with solver GTO ranges. So that's one thing he says, is just don't feel like responsible to play to like a minimum defense frequency or something post flop if your player pool just doesn't play that way. Feel free to exploit them by folding tighter or by making other adjustments. Playing GTO is really only appropriate for GTO opponents. So one thing that I always love looking at this stuff is the 4-bet bluff candidates that these pros pick in this spot, because I think it's pretty clear when you open and someone 3-bets you. I'm always thinking, and this is, I think, what Keith was getting at earlier here, like, who is this opponent? What kind of 3-betting range do they have? If they're only ever 3-betting the absolute nuts, aces, kings, sometimes queens, sometimes ace king, then you can kind of put that person in a box and you can play against them. Don't get me wrong, you can't play against that range well. Like, you can't profitably play against that range easily, but you can play against that player pretty easily, because when they're in that position, it informs how you can act on future streets really easily. So like, if you are deep enough, you could call a 3-bet with all sorts of stuff, because they're only going to have one pair at the end of the hand, and it's going to be an overpair, and they're going to often pay off to a 2-pair or some weird holding that you can have. So there's an element to that. In the blinds that we're talking about with a shorter stack depth of 40 big blinds, you can't really afford to make those speculative calls. So typically, if you've got an opponent that's only 3-betting, 3% or something like that, you're going to be 4-betting aces and maybe kings, but honestly, just like folding the rest, because he's only going to be proceeding with hands that have you crushed. So that opponent is kind of easy to work to play against, because they've defined themselves very, very easily. And then there's 2 other kinds of opponents. There's the ones that 3-bet you from the top down with a linear value range. And then there's the players that 3-bet you with a polarized range, where they're betting with the top of their range, they're raising with the top and bottom of their range, but they're calling with the middle. as opposed to a linear range where they're only raising from the top down and then they're calling with the worst part of it. And you would want to have a different four betting technique against those two different opponents. So if someone only ever three bets aces down to king, aces down to tens, and ace queen plus, that's a linear range. They're calling with ace jack suited, ace 10 suited, pocket eights, suited connectors. So if you had a hand like ace five suited, well, maybe that's not a good example. If you have a hand that their range doesn't have a lot of garbage in it, is what I'm trying to say. So when they're three betting in a top down linear fashion, they don't have a lot of bad hands in that range. So you should be proceeding against it as though it's a value range. If they are the kind of player who calls with the middle and they're three betting this polarized range, then you want to be bluff four betting at a certain frequency so that they are in a position where they're kind of indifferent to the balanced range that you're playing in this way. I'm doing a really bad job of explaining this right now, but basically they have some hands that they can fold. They have some hands that they can fold in a polarized range. So you should give them some opportunities to fold by bluffing.
So basically you're trying to anticipate what their likely reaction would be to a four bet.
Thank you, Eric. Genius. Yeah.
So I actually, I was actually in the home game maybe a couple weeks ago, and I had Jack's early position, opened it up, and a player three bet me, pretty small. We're pretty deep. We're over 60 big blinds. I can't remember. It was anywhere between 60 and 100. So deep.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I had made it 2.5, and then he made it like 6, so it was 3.5 to call. Really good odds. I looked at his stats that I had about in excess of 500. It was the home game, so I had a lot of. He had a 1% three bet range. 1%. 1%.
Right.
Okay. So we can narrow its range. So I was like, I'm only calling to set mine. I mean, I'm purely I have the odds to set mine, but that's it. If I miss my set, I mean, I'm gonna invest 3.5 to hit a set. If I don't hit it, then I fold. But I mean,
yeah, it's amazing, right? And
yeah.
but like
I mean, I almost thought if he had made it bigger, actually, it's an easy fold with jacks. But he priced me in to set mine.
Yep. And that's not hyperbole, right? I mean, like in other cases, jacks are in a four bet shoving range, just because it's one of the best hands you can get dealt. But you nailed it, man. When your opponent is proceeding with such a strong range, like that's an exploitative maneuver on your part to rob them of those chips that other people are going to put in the pot there, right? No, I love that. And there's players out there that when they three bet, whether they're three betting with an entirely value range or not, they're still never folding to a four bet. It's like some of these players where you can kind of set the wrong trap for some people, where you're like, oh, this player is three betting way too wide. I'll bluff four bet them and make them fold a big part of their range, but then they actually continue with that part of their range anyway. So that's not a good candidate for the bluff four bet. You should be just expanding the value range of your four betting range instead and adding in like tens or nines or something like that. So it really, like Keith said at the beginning, like it really is very opponent dependent. And especially when we get hands like ace five suited, like we were talking about earlier, ace five suited is a great candidate for all sorts of actions. It's a great candidate for a call. It's a great candidate for a three bet. It's a great candidate for a four bet, because it's got qualities that suit lots of different circumstances. So you have to kind of say, okay, well then the circumstance isn't going to be the tiebreaker. What's the kind of mistake that this opponent's going to make, and how can I put them in a position to make that mistake best with this one? So if it's someone who's going to, stack off with a small flush, you don't want to force them out of the hand by playing ace five suited aggressively pre-flop. You want to get into pot with them where you're going to flush over flush them. And that's how you're going to make that player pay off the most. Other players are going to open ace 10 and then fold to a 3-bet every time. Well, you definitely want to be 3-betting them with ace 5 because they're going to fold all the better aces, and you're making money off them that way. And of course, there's a trade-off, right? A lot of villains they might even make more than one mistake. Heaven forbid. No one in this room, I'm sure. But how do we weigh against the different tactics that we can take against them? So one of the things that I thought was really cool, they go through these different positions, and Ryan talks about, okay, here's your 4-bet. So again, I'm not going to show the video here because we put this out for free, and I don't want to share LPP's paid stuff with just anybody. But I can say that they talk about it very mathematically. It's beautifully systematized. They break it down from the visual graph and then also the number of combos and how that all comes together. And in each situation, they say, here's our opening range according to GTO assumptions. Here's our villain's 3-betting range. And then here's how we're going to respond. Here's the hands we're going to fold. Here are the hands we're going to call. Here are the hands we're going to value 4-bet. And here are the hands that we're going to bluff 4-bet. And the value hands are pretty similar throughout the entire operation, all the different positions. And here, I'll just do a screen share. Just for fun, I popped these into Equilab. And so this is Equilab. It's a great program. It's free. If you go to pokerstrategy.com, you can download it there. We don't have any kind of affiliate relationship with them. I just think it's great that they have this awesome free software. And so it's a fantastic way to start thinking about ranges and how to build ranges. So as I was watching the video, every time they mentioned a 4-bet candidate, I just clicked it here. So I've called this LPP 4-bet candidates. And the yellow ones are ones that were referred to as value 4-bets, and the blue ones are ones that were referred to as bluff 3-bets. Now, in some cases, a value 3-bet versus a certain range might be a bluff 3-bet versus another range, but in this case, it was because the stack sizes were consistent, it was pretty similar. So you can see the tightest value range was Jacks plus and Ace King, and that was in positions where the original opening range was tight, and so the 3-betting range was also tight. So our 4-bet jamming range should also be tight. Yeah, Eric.
Ace Jack off really a value?
The good. It was in one spot only because I thought that too. It was in cutoff versus a button 3-bet.
Okay.
So it's in one of the widest possible spots.
Okay.
So and that's that. Thank you for pointing that out, Eric, because that's the thing that as you go through this exercise, and I hope people go and watch the video. It came out on June 1st at Rec Poker. If you go to Rec Poker and search "Learning with Partners," the video came out on June 1st, and the difference between what's a value 4-bet and what's a call really depends a lot on the position, because those are the only variables we have here. So that one, I was going to draw your attention to that one too, Eric. You're so savvy, because that is when the cutoff opens and the button 3-bets. So that's the widest. Yeah, cutoff open, button 3-bet. That's right. That's right. And that's also where we're getting some of these ace 3 to ace 6 suited bluffs, king 10 suited, queen jack. Like a lot of these ones are in that range as well, even though they're also in some of the other ranges. I also thought it was really interesting. So we talk about ranges a lot. So if this is a very wide, if this is a very narrow range, then hands that are at the bottom of this range, let's say they're like shoulder height for me, okay, just visually. So they're at the bottom of this range. So they're going to be 3-bet bluff candidates in some cases, okay? But let's say the range is a much deeper range and it's all the way down to here, okay? Now, these same hands that are here, they're now actually in the middle of the range. So they're the same hands they were before, ace 10 suited or like whatever you want to call them. Well, no, they'd be worse than that, but there's much worse hands than them now that we can use as those 3-bet candidates. So because they're in the middle of our range, even though they're the same hands, we end up playing them as a call in this spot differently. And that same principle applies to different stack sizes. But basically what it means is that in some cases, there's going to be hands that you call with instead of 3-betting. In other cases, you're going to 3-bet instead of calling with those hands. And it's going to mostly have to do with the size, the position of the open raiser, and the position of the 3-better, because that's all the information we have right now to determine the ranges. When we're playing in real life in the home game or live at a local casino or something, we're influencing the ranges that we're using to make these calculations based on what we know about these players. So we'll be able to make better assumptions about their ranges, and we'll be able to make better assumptions about how to proceed with various parts of our own ranges.
Right. We have to adjust for the fact that everybody's not using a GTO opening range.
Right.
Or a GTO 3-bet range.
Yeah.
So we need to adjust for those factors.
And usually they're going to be not playing as wide as GTO recommends typically.
Depends
from
on
like
the
an opening. Yeah, it depends on the player.
It really depends on the player.
Extremely so. Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, certainly for passive actions, I think a lot of players tend to be more passive than GTO would suggest with a wider range of hands for sure. And as we know, though, it's not calling isn't a great way to get rich in poker. If you had to choose between putting the bet in or calling it, I know what I'd be choosing.
With the notable exception of calling an overly tight opening range because you're hoping to get paid off.
Yes. Yeah. In exactly that kind of spot that we talked about earlier, right? We've got that like low pocket pair or something like that, and or like that 7-6 or something, and that if you can beat a 1-pair hand, they will pay you off. That's a good one, and that's another reason why people, it's generally good to be playing disciplined, tight ranges. But if your ranges are too tight, they become kind of predictable, and even strong ranges are easy to play against when they're predictable. Just being strong, if your one quality is that you're strong, but everyone knows that you're strong, that's not as good. That's not as helpful. So one thing I noticed was that Ace Jack suited just never got mentioned. It's too good a hand to bluff with, and it's not good enough a hand to 4-bet value with in any of the circumstances that we looked at in this video. Obviously, we could find other circumstances where Ace Jack would be a profitable 4-bet bluff. All you need to construct is a wide enough 3-betting range. But this was sort of made me think a little bit about, we talked about those cusps a lot, those value cusps where it's like Ace 10 is just magically different than Ace 9 because it can make the Broadway straight. And Ace Jack is kind of, I think people kind of know this intuitively. Like it's one of those hands that it wins small pots and loses big pots. Like it's one of those hands that tends to have 1-pair good kicker. And those are, you just can't win big pots that way usually with like one pair hands, but you win a lot of small pots. And so it becomes kind of like, and Ace Jack gets referenced here as a value 3-bet, but it specifically says in that spot to 3-bet or to 4-bet Ace Queen suited, and it does not mention Ace Jack suited in that same spot. So they're intentionally holding it back because because of its suitedness, because it's got that extra bit of equity, and that makes it worth calling and not getting. Yeah, that still doesn't make any sense to me. This is an all-in situation, isn't it? So I guess Yeah, I guess it's just they're just saying it's good enough to call, but
Well,
not
it
good enough.
also, I mean, you do need stronger hands in your calling range.
Yeah.
So it strengthens your calling range.
And you are kind of making room for it by three betting some of these other ones as bluffs, right? Like I think that's the theory, that you can call
Right.
with more of these. And yeah, ace jack just seems like people struggle with ace jack, offsuit and suited. I think it's just one of those hands that people feel like is a tough one. And it's one of those ones that I think we also feel like typically it makes a good three bet candidate because it's easy to respond to a four bet, because it's really far behind a four betting range, but it's doing pretty well against a two bet call range, against the range that might call your three bet. But it's one of those hands where we feel like we give our opponent the opportunity to like play perfectly when we four bet with it. So yeah, ace jack suited. I just thought that was kind of interesting. There's some other little oddities around like sixes and sevens and how they kind of perform in various situations as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that question with the sixes came up in the Discord chat this morning.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's why are we calling sixes but raising with fives?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what was the question? It's
Yeah,
all about board coverage.
let me go pop that. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
pop open that now.
It does weird. It does weird thing with board coverages. Like I can't
Yeah.
remember which range it was, but like king six was like a call, but ace six was a fold in
I
response.
think it was
to a
in the
three bet.
LPP Discord, Jim.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm just flipping over
Yeah.
there now. Thanks.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of strange too, a little difficult to understand, because if it's for board coverage, then why aren't we in that particular scenario in the chat? Why aren't we covering fours, threes, and twos at all?
Mm-hmm.
You know, but we're covering fives, but not sixes. You know, it's a little hard to understand, but it's got to be something to do with board coverage, and sixes might be dominating fives or below or something. It's probably one of those thin edge things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's got to have something to do with how your opponent's range proceeds versus that, right?
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. Well, out of curiosity, when one of you guys have the time, send me that Discord link. For some reason, I can't find it in here. But I remember that also was that sort of was noteworthy to me as well. Yeah, jamming sevens and also like eights was at a very low frequency, and then sixes not at all. Oh yeah, there was queen six versus queen seven. That was another one too. I wasn't sure if that was the same thing. Open call queen six and then open fold queen seven.
Yeah, there's little anomalies or like those.
Mm-hmm. And then do we? I guess is there something about it being in that middle of the grid? You know, those sixes and sevens are kind of like that delineation point for a lot of hands. Like all the middle straights run through them, and hands are generally like above or below.
Yeah, I think it's like some kind of removal where like your opponent won't be opening, you know, something with a six, but so you have coverage where they don't, or something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that makes sense. Maybe that's something we can unpack in the forums or something.
Yeah, there's a weird thing. I mean, the computer's been, you know, it's supposedly running trillions of these different combinations. So yeah, I'm not sure if it's really worth the time to unpack. I mean,
right.
Other than from purely
like academic
intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
Because like he said, I mean, these are probably really edge cusp, like the difference in EV is pretty low.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, Eric, because, you know, especially at our level, we're serious recreational players. But like we've got jobs, our time is a valuable commodity. We don't have an infinite amount of time to play or study. And I think choosing what we spend our study time on is really important. And it's kind of nerds like us kind of have fun with this abstract, academic, kind of elegant, balanced approach to poker. But at the end of the day, we're out there to try and like win poker games, win poker tournaments. And we should really just be kind of sticking to the bread and butter spots that we see 9 times every session, and not these weird things where it's like, well, every 2,000 hands, I'm going to get this spot where the difference between queen 6 and queen 7 suited. Yeah, I'm with you. Find a better place to polish up your edge.
Yeah, I don't know how to put a link on, but it's under in Learn Pro Poker, and then under Range Trainer Pro, and in the channel RTP General.
Okay, cool. Now I get it. I didn't see it in RTP. That's why. All right, sweet. Well, I'll post to that in the forums, and we can see what some people have to say about this. Yeah, that. Yeah, something about those 6s and 7s, right? Yeah, Keith, I see you typing in there. That's great. I really, and I should say, yeah, also Rec Poker members have access to the Learn Pro Poker premium Discord as well, and there's so much good stuff in there. Technical material about ranges and sizes and things like that. Obviously, having access to all Kale Cleaton's Range Trainer Pro stuff is fantastic. So if anyone's out there watching this video on YouTube, I would encourage you to go to rec.poker and invest $5 in your first month as a premium member. You never know what you might find. All right. So, and then there was some just real obvious stuff like call more in position, 4-bet or fold more out of position. You know, that's going to be true no matter what. I like this one kind of general rule. If you've got a pocket pair and you open to 2x and your opponent shoves over you, if you feel like their range contains at least one pair lower than yours, then you can call. It was just a nice way that he put of sort of just thinking about it in shorthand. So if you've got pocket 7s and the player to your left has, 13 big blinds or whatever, and you think they'd be shoving everything down to 8s, don't call. If you think they'd be shoving everything down to 6s, that's probably enough combos that, given the money already in the pot, it's going to be a roughly profitable call at that point. And you know me, I like pulling little shorthand rules like that.
Yeah,
spots like this.
Interesting shorthand, interesting tool for the toolbox.
Yeah, right. And I'm sure it's not like perfectly mathematically sound in every circumstance, but it's worth trading some precision for some application. I think that's something we should always be looking at trading.
Yeah, I like that because I do find it helpful. Like when somebody puts in a bet, I think, would they do that with X? And X is the hand that I just barely beat.
Right.
The hand that's just one notch lower than mine.
Yeah, so I think that's useful. A good way to think about it.
I think I'm going to start doing my note taking online in Poker Tracker and saying what pair they shoved with.
That's a great way to be thinking about it. And the stack size, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I like that. And there are some ways you can customize the notes in Note Tracker for Poker Tracker 4 to have it capture some of that stuff. I think we're just getting someone in the chat. Let me enter them in here. Oh, that's weird. Now I am no longer. Oh, I see what's happened. I see what's going on here. We are being joined by Eric Anderson, who is still connecting. Yeah, you can adjust Poker Tracker 4. You can edit the Note Tracker function so that it can automatically just note the range of hands that players do different things with, and that's a really good one. That's a really good one to be able to pull up.
Okay.
I don't have it. I would show you now, but it takes forever to load, and I we made a new rule a little while ago: no more doing that stuff on live TV because it just takes too long, and I always press the wrong button or something. But one of these Saturdays, Eric, I do. Is it next Saturday? Second Saturday of the month, I do Poker Tracker review group, and I'd love to just spend the whole hour just talking about different ways
that'd
to
be
work
great.
in Note Tracker. Yeah, there's a lot of good
Mhm.
there's a lot of good stuff there. And just the way my brain works, it's easier for me to see it all laid out like that, like lists and graphics. That's how my brain likes to see things. That's why I think this grid is so helpful for me. Because when you look at hands like this, when you look at grids like this, not only are you looking at the hands that they say should be 4-bets, but of course you're also looking at all the hands that, in my opinion, the blue ones are kind of a mixed strategy that you could consider 4-betting, or you could consider calling or folding. And then all the other ones are ones that it's interesting that you would just, something about them is such that you would choose not to 4-bet them. And we can kind of extrapolate something by looking at it and think about, okay, so these are the kinds of hands that are better to 4-bet with. These are the kinds of hands that are better not to 4-bet with. And as you can see, it's a lot of aces and pocket pairs, the good hands. And then, some of these suited broadways. And I think
I'm just wondering how many of us really 4-bet rip with ace-3 suited.
Right. And these are rips. Like they're talking about this.
Yeah,
this
they're
is a 4-bet
jams.
rip. Yeah, they're jams. And and what's interesting about that is that it really doesn't matter how playable they are post flop. Like it matters what their equity is when they're called, but it doesn't matter how playable they are, because you're not going to get the chance to raise a draw on the flop. You're not going to get the chance. So like some hands that, like 7-6, for instance, you would choose to have them in like a bluff 3-betting range when you're deeper, because you can play them aggressively post flop. One of the valuable things about 7-6 suited is that it's going to pick up a lot of draws between straights and flushes. So then you get to add this layer later of fold equity to them. But when you're jamming pre-flop, you don't have that ability later. So playability is really not important to you anymore.
So pure equity is
Equity.
and blockers.
And blockers. Yep,
Right.
exactly.
Jim, can we go back to something you mentioned early on?
Yeah.
Was it's because it's being so villain dependent. Some of them 3-bet with a linear range, and some of them 3-bet with a polarized range, and the differences in the way that we respond to that.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to assume that if they're 3-betting with a polarized range, we would put bluffs in our 4-bet range.
Yeah,
Or-
and you might choose. It sort of depends, actually. It sort of depends, like the stack depth a little bit. It depends in position and out of position. Like and it also depends a little bit, like what are their post flop tendencies,
Yeah.
But well, yeah, Eric, sorry, did you want to jump in there?
Oh, I was going to mention that whether somebody 3-bets with linear versus polarized, it not only depends on the villain, but their position. So if you're on the button, you'll tend to go more linear because you're playing in position, because you're calling range. So if you're on the button, you'll have a wider calling range. So I'm not explaining it right, but
Yeah.
I think it also depends on your position as well, of whether
Okay.
you to be more linear or polar, as well as villain type.
Yeah, and let's go one level back and think about it from someone's 2-betting, someone's opening, and we're the ones in the position to 3-bet them. So we have a choice between 3-betting in a linear or a polarized way. And when we're 3-betting in a linear way, we mostly want them to call with second best hands, right? I mean,
Yeah. Okay. Right.
and then I'm trying. This is fun. I'm enjoying talking this out, because this is another one of these situations where like there's competing interest. Like being in the button, you want to call because you're going to be in position post flop and it's going to make everything easier. But those are also great reasons to 3-bet too, right? With a weaker range. So, okay, Keith, you've asked such a good question that I feel like should be really easy to answer here. Because I know just from talking about it over the course of this hour, and I feel like I've talked myself in a circle, but basically what you're asking is, how would we treat someone with a polarized 3-betting range differently than we would treat someone with a linear 3-betting range?
Yes, and I
Yeah.
think that it impacts on how we use the hands that are blue in this Equilab
Yeah.
screenshot here.
Yeah. And so let's say, I want to, doing this stuff live is hard. I feel like there's such a
Yeah.
good answer for you, but I'm not going to be able to give it here for some reason. My brain is not giving it to me.
So start with, so somebody with a linear range has mostly strong hands.
Yes.
So they have less junk to fold out,
Yes.
right? So so I don't think we want to 3-bet with a polarized or 4-bet
Oh, you know what?
jam.
We're missing one piece of information. Okay. We're missing one piece of information. We don't know how they respond to 4-bets.
Yeah.
And that's what we
True.
should be thinking. Okay. Thank you. Oh my God. I was like, why am I not getting this? So the question isn't really, the questions we're going to get to are going to answer that question. The question is really, how do they respond to 4-bets? So that's the action that we get to leverage by our 4-bets. So you'll be able to tell, if with your HUD, one of the stats, I'm not sure if it's on the Rec Poker HUD, but it's easy to add if it's not, is what frequency do they fold to a 4-bet after 3-betting? And that obviously is a very good stat to have, because the higher that number, now you can make assumptions about their 3-betting range. So if they fold to 4-bet after 3-betting a lot, they're not 3-betting with a top-down strong only linear range. Or maybe they are, but they're still folding too much. Like they're 3-betting 10s plus, but they're folding jacks and 10s to the 4-bet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of player you want to 4-bet absolute garbage hands that are folding a lot when they 3-bet. So you would never 4-bet them with like aces, because they're going to overfold in that spot. Or I mean, maybe, well, bad example, but whereas a player that never folds to 4-bets, you would be crazy to try and 4-bet them with like ace-5 offsuit or something, because you're only putting money in bad against that range. So with some of these hands here, like let's take all these wheel aces, ace-2 to ace-5, and we'll include ace-6 in this conversation. If you're 3-bet by a player who folds a lot to 4-bets, I think these would be good candidates to put in your 4-bet range, because they block a lot of the best hands that your opponent could have with an ace, and they're just not good enough to really call with. And what's nice about it is that they're going to get folds from better hands that have you dominated, because they're going to have to fold hands like ace-7, ace-8, ace-9 when you 4-bet jam, because those were their bluff 3-bets in the first place. But if your opponent doesn't have any of these hands in their 3-bet range, then these aren't really good candidates for a 4-bet, because they're just those hands that we want them to fold aren't there as much. And, they still might fold the bottom of their range, but in that case, you might even choose a hand like ace-10 to make that with, because it's actually, well, again, it's different when you're jamming versus when you're going to have some playability post flop. So I don't want to get too far into that.
Yeah, and this is really relevant right now for those of us who play on ACR because they're 3-betting a lot and then overfolding to the 4-bet. Even when I've had a bad day on there, my 4-bets have had a good day.
Yeah, and I think that's because people aren't catching up, right? Like people are caught up to the fact that 3-betting is a good skill and that people are overfolding to 3-betting. And so they're just getting comfortable 3-betting. It's like c-betting, right? C-betting was like unheard of 15 years ago. And all of a sudden people just started betting the flop with range advantage and picking up pots, and now everybody does it. So 3-betting is the same way. Everyone has started 3-betting because it's like the new c-betting. So you're one level ahead of them, Keith, because you're introducing this bluff 4-bet. And that's what's leveraging these wide 3-betting ranges that these players have. So what are you using? What hands are you using, Keith, in those spots when you're making these wider 4-bets than usual?
I'm also using the ace-7 suited.
Yep.
And otherwise, it looks pretty much like this. I might be chopping off those tiny pairs. But I might be doing it with, it depends. It's villa dependent. I might do it or I might not with the 8s.
Right.
Yeah. But definitely with all the aces, because with all those suited aces, because I'm blocking so much of that 3-betting range that they're doing it with king 9 or something.
Yeah, and I'll just put some up here as an example. Like, and I kind of like, so this is sort of what, let's pull this off. 6s was out of there. Something like that. Yeah, but not that one, and not that one. And it really matters that it's a shove. We talked about this earlier, because when there's no like folding portion of it, the equity when called really does matter. And you know, these ones, they're going to come up against better aces sometimes. But the goal of these bluff shoves is not to be doing great when they're bluffs. They're not going to be ahead when your opponent calls a 4-bet, because they're typically going to have a hand better than ace-3. But a lot of the time they fold. Sometimes when they do, you've got an overcard, right? And then, you know, other times you've got the 3-outer to break some hearts. So it's that equity that when called that does matter. So what are some ways that we can, we've got a few minutes left here. What are some ways that we can, I want to give Keith a better answer to his excellent question, but like, how do we exploit players now that we've identified that they have a linear range or a polarized range, or that they 3-bet too much, or that they fold too much? I guess for me, it's more about like, just what are the factors I'm thinking about? If I have an opponent, I'm always just trying to make it easy for my opponent to make mistakes, the kind of mistakes that they want to make, the kind of mistakes that they drove all this way to make. That's the mistake I want to make them. I want it to be as easy as possible for them to make. So if my opponent folds like 3-bets really wide and folds to 4-bets a lot, I'm just going to be 4-betting the crap out of them. And honestly, it doesn't, like, I'll be looking for bad aces like these ones because they've got a blocker and they've got some playability. I like the suited Broadway, you know, kind of for the same reason. I'm with you about the low pocket pairs because they actually kind of block the worst hands that your opponents have. But they're still, like, I would consider this part of a linear jamming range, kind of, in a way, even though it's represented differently in the videos. But other than that, like, what if your opponent 3-bets and they always call, you're just going to be 4-betting them with really strong hands only, right?
Yes. Yeah, you don't want to be called unless you got something that beats their range.
Right.
So
yeah. So I think we also, if somebody is always, we know somebody's always betting with a very strong linear range, we can actually fold out some of our weakest holdings.
Mm-hmm.
Right. When we don't turn them into bluffs, but we just fold them out.
And here's a
It-
good,
It depends on how they're responding too, because
Right.
because-
Assuming that they're three betting with a very strong linear range that they don't
Mhm.
intend to fold,
yeah,
then we actually can exploit that by folding out the bottom of our range that doesn't
Yeah.
play well against that
right.
range.
Yeah, it's only when they're when we think that they're doing this when they're three betting with kind of thin value.
Right. So
Yeah,
if
yeah.
we think they're playing really face up,
Yeah,
right, only three betting with just the very, very, very top linear, then we can exploit that by overfolding. Whereas against a more balanced opponent with a more balanced three betting range, then we have to defend.
Yeah, and with
We have
calls,
to defend more, right?
yeah. Whereas if they got an overly wide but linear range, then they've got a lot of that the thin value. Thin value hates getting raised. We can do that with a polarized range.
Yes.
I'm just putting some ranges together here when I'm not accidentally clicking them out. And one thing that we were looking at here, talking about all this, is so if you've got them on an extremely strong range, let's say jacks plus ace king suited and ace king offsuit, your ace king doesn't even have 40% equity against that range. And there's going to be dead money in the pot, and you can talk about, like what's he going to do with his own ace king, or what's he going to do with jacks or something like that. But there are opponents who they only ever three bet with jacks plus or ace king. And if you have ace king and you've opened and this player three bets you, it's just not a slam dunk. Like, let's get this ace king in there. Stack size is going to have a lot to do with it. How sure you are of your read is going to have a lot to do with it. But like, there are spots where it's just, and let's just make it a little. Let's say you're looking at ace queen offsuit, right? Like, it's just you're a huge dog. Let's just say it's ace queen suited, because that's the kind of hand that people don't mind getting involved with. Still 2-1, and it really does matter a lot, your opponent's range, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's why I don't like, we get stuck on these, like, oh, this is a 3 betting hand, this is a 4 betting hand, like I have to like defend my range by playing aggressively here and stuff. And that's all sort of true theoretically, and it helps us think about poker in the big picture. But at the end of the day, you're playing against one opponent. Do you have a good read on this opponent? Trust your read, and don't be afraid to make what feels like a strange laydown or a strange shove too, right? Because those are all equally exploitable against different opponents.
There are even players that you'll lay down kings.
Yeah, I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
I've done it, not often. I've laid queens down a few times, but kings, I think I've only done kings live once, but I've done it online a couple times. But yeah, it does, when like, and I think as poker players too, we get this sense where, like, I just want to see it. I want to make sure. I want to know. I want to be like confident that it was in fact. I want to know how good my hand reading was. Yeah, exactly.
Or you were behind. I want to know I was behind. Yeah, see.
And you're willing to pay for it.
Yeah. I've done that. I've called off the 100 big blind jam because I just wanted to know so that I could take a note, and because it's only $10.
Right. Yeah. It's funny, man. And then I think that's part of it. Part of as I've gotten older and as I've just like played more hands of poker over my life, that's one thing I'm getting better at, is not needing to know. Just not needing to know. Just saying, you know what? I think I was behind here, and he's bluffing me sometimes. And it's hard though. It's hard for us. Like, we just want to win every hand, and we want to like know why we didn't win that hand, or could we have won that hand? And so if there's even a chance that they were bluffing, that like burns us up inside. But it's a leak. It's a leak, and in a lot of these spots against these players, like, honestly, even if they're bluffing occasionally, they're not bluffing at a high enough frequency to make bluff catching profitable. In a lot of cases, honestly, they're not. So yeah, fancy play syndrome rears its ugly head for me all the time. I like start projecting this stuff on them, and oh well. That's why we're not playing in the main event, eh?
Yeah, got to be like that pitcher that just gave up a home run. You got to get that out of your head and go on to the next batter.
Yep. Exactly. And I think that's true. Not to get into the poker as a sport kind of thing, but it's true for any performance, anything where you have to like clear your mind and just perform at a high level. A short memory is imperative, and honestly, like a positive attitude, but not a Pangloss kind, like it has to hurt in order to learn. I firmly believe, like, that's why no one ever, it's hard to play money. It's hard to learn without hurting. But it just, just hurt enough to make that memory stick.
I like the way Michael Acevedo did it in his book. He says the amount has to matter, but not so much that you're taking a chance at risk of ruin.
I love that quote. Yeah. It's like, it should be stakes that hurt, but not stakes that, you can't afford to lose.
Yeah. Moderation, right? Everything in moderation, even pain, without the bitter, how do you taste the sweet, right? Like, that's what life's all about. All right. Well, we're not going to find a more Zen note than that to wrap this baby up. Let's leave Jim's meditation hour here. Maybe next week we'll get into even more poker strat. Keith, let's get into the forums on that, because I want to tease this out a bit. This notion of just like, what actual concrete steps can you take to exploit players when they present a polarized versus a linear range? Because that's something that we can all learn from and apply to various different spots. And there's got to be a better way to get at it than what we answered here. So if you're watching at home, head over to rec.poker, check out the forums page. And there might be a forum there by Keith Monkey System or myself, or one of the two Erics that joined us here today. You never know. Two Erics. Oh my, we have made it. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Always enjoy these, and we'll see you on another Saturday soon, I hope. Take care.
With two Erics, we're in there with the Sharks when we got two Erics.
That's right. Look out.